My name is Charley Henley. My job title is Visual Effects Supervisor, and I've worked on a number of films in that role. The most recent being Napoleon, previous to that, Cinderella, also Prometheus with Ridley Scott, and numerous others. The first films that I started doing proper VFX work on was the Harry Potter series, and I worked on the first 5 as a compositor and also composite supervisor. So I studied engineering to start with. I wanted to work in engineering and work on renewable energy, actually. And then in the end, that type of studying I didn't enjoy, and I dropped out of university and started working in cinema. And I got a job working as a runner with a production company called Merchant Ivory. And then that was the beginning of my proper film education. Starting as a runner, I got to do all sorts of different jobs. They got me in the office, and they got me, and I was really interested in cinematography at the time, so I worked with some great cinematographers as an assistant and projectionists. And in the end, I worked on a film, and it's like, what job are you going to do next? Well, editorial has started up, why don't you go work for editorial? And so I spent a few years in doing edits for films as a first assistant editor. No, I was never first. I got second. I was like a trainee, then second assistant editor. And then that's where I kind of got a taste for visual effects, because one of my jobs was cutting in visual effects for a film called Pinocchio that Angus Bickerton was supervising. And I met him, and that was in Shepperton Studios. And I spent some time watching what he was doing, mix of quite practical and CG stuff. And so that was kind of, that aligned to my skills that I thought I had, which was sort of artistic as well as a little bit of engineering in there, obviously. And so with that, I got a job at Mill Film and was working as a tech operator, where we would do film outs, cut the film. The editorial skills helped a bit. And then I got a job there then doing rotoscoping and paint out fixes, and then one job led to the next. So it was a slow ladder of education continuously. And then after that, compositing, and moved to MPC as a compositor. Got the compositing supervisor job, did a few films like that, then got the VFX supervisor job, and finally into production side VFX supervising. So in a way, like doing all these different roles just kind of built up a skill set and self-confidence to get on and be back in the film side with the filmmakers, which is what I'm doing at the moment. Digital came out when I think I did some short films as well on film, and friends of mine, I edited it for them, and we were shooting it on 16mm and Super 8. But the film, was a Merchant Ivory film called Picasso I worked on, and that was all shot film. Everything about it was basically on film, but it was cut in an Avid, but we always had to have the film as well. We had the film cutting copy to project it, was on film. Everybody looked at everything on projections. When I was at the Mill doing visual effects, and even at MPC for quite a long time, film was the heart of the thing, and we were basically taking the film, scan it, work on it digitally, and then record it out, which was one of my jobs, back out to film, and then put that to the lab. It would come back the next day, and we'd project it on a film projector, and everybody would go down to the cinema that they had in the company, would watch it on film, and would be like, oh, it looks much better on film than on my monitor, so it's good. And it was a completely different experience, you know. And the life cycle of doing a shot on film was quite something, because the deadline was every night by 11, you have to get the shot done, send it to get recorded out, so that then when you come back in the morning, you can see it in the cinema, and that's where we judged everything. It seems bizarre now. The process is somehow simpler, because there was a lot of unknowns with film. Like one day, the lab would come back and it was everything looked purple. and the next day it'd be another color. Another color. It was always like a slightly moving target, so you weren't always sure that you had it right. But the film did help blend things together, I think. So, grain was always something that I enjoyed as a compositor, putting grain on stuff, and it just helps kind of blend things together. Gives it a certain style, in a way, over the top. So that makes it easier, but now then it was like 2K projections and digital projections, and it's really ruthless. And in fact, the only film I've done at 4K was Napoleon, and that was like, oh my God, there's so much detail in that. So reviewing that on a 4K monitor, I'm glad I'm not compositing it now, because I send back notes, I could see tiny details everywhere. I'm sorry, it's on there, So the attention to detail gets more. The role of production visual effects supervisor, which is what I'm doing now, has many hats, really. And that's kind of what I like about it, because it's a long process, and you're looking after many aspects of the filmmaking pipeline, really. It covers, as production, you are first port of call to the director for anything visual effects, probably hired by the studio, maybe hired very early on in the production. Often the first person after production designer and the director. So it starts with a fresh script, and it's helping the studio figure out how much a production may cost in visual effects, and you're trying to put a budget together. So and then you usually work with a visual effects producer as well to help with the budgeting side of things. So you're sort of hand in hand like a team. And that's just early pre-production. So you're like there, pre-production, imagining what's going on from the script, trying to find out the money, figuring out ways, start talking to all the heads of department that are also on the film together. The director of photography comes on, the costume guys come on, all the rest of the main team, production designer, obviously, as I said. So you're working together with them to figure out what responsibilities do you all have or share. Do you need to help the production designer because he wants to spend his money building a beautiful set in one place, but in another place he can only build a set to a certain height. We need to top it up so it's good for some cameras. So you just sort of have what locations are we going to go? You have a lot of this kind of creative debate about how all these heads of department are going to work together. At the same time, you're getting an understanding of the type of work you're going to do, what the actual shoot is going to be like. And then with the shoot, you need to set up a team to help manage the shoot. Potentially, depends how big the film is. But you might need certain things done like data capture, like a scanning team, scanning, recording, camera data being recorded to help everything in post-production. So you also design, like bringing together that team, managing them on set. And then you're looking ahead at post-production. So then you're looking at who's going to help you do the shots. If it's big enough, you're not going to do it yourself, very unlikely. So are you going to hire a number of companies, one company or not? Are you doing previs? If you're doing previs, maybe that might have been done in pre-production. You'll be help direct the previs or help the director direct the previs. And then in post, you're obviously managing, that's more kind of coming back home to what's normally a post job, being a composite supervisor or an in-house visual effects supervisor. So then you've sort of got all this material that you've helped create, and you're feeding that through to whoever's actually going to do the work, whichever companies that might be. And then you're directing them and helping the director direct them. So in all these things, it's like you're kind of a VFX glue that helps all these departments work together and helps all their creative efforts, and obviously particularly the director's creative effort, channel through to anything to do with visual effects. With resolutions for films, and indeed television more so, now it's probably becoming norm that it's 4K, but traditionally, from where I came from, television when I started was PAL, in England at least, which was like 720 by 576. That was how big it was. And then we were working on film, and to do film, way back in the day, they used to do shoot visual effects on VistaVision as like really high format in order to keep the resolution high. But a bit later, it became normal that if you're shooting something on 35mm film, then you should scan it at 2K. So 2048 by 1556 became the normal size of like film, and that was the standard. And everyone did tests like, should we do higher resolution or not? And the general tests were the amount of grain in the film means that if you do higher resolution, you just get more detailed grain. You can't actually get any more detail in there. So it was always a pretty good standard to 2K. And at the time also, it was, that was pretty high res for software. So we usually worked at like half res or quarter res and then used the software to up res to 2K to get the speed, up to speed. But now I think 4K is pretty much going to become the norm. Netflix, the TV channels, Netflix is like always wants 4K, and other studios are following. But in fact, Disney are generally still happy with 2K. So there's a bit of both. And I think you'd be hard pushed really it depends on the film. I mean, you've got to get very close to say, does it matter if it's sharper or not? But I somehow enjoyed working on 4K, I have to admit. If a film is released on 70mm IMAX, there is a question as to whether it has an effect on the visual effects beforehand. I remember at some point I did work on some projects which were going to be, or we were looking at doing projects at MPC that were going to be for IMAX directly. And so we were talking about pushing the resolution of that project, because it was designed for IMAX, a certain short film or something designed for IMAX. And in a way, if you really want that full IMAX quality resolution, you should be doing higher resolution than 4K, I think, probably. But now it seems more the norm that films are kind of mastered at 2K or 4K and then up-resed for IMAX as a process. So I would say I haven't worked on anything that needed to be treated differently. And in a way, you can only really target one ideal situation, and then everything else is like a secondary process. So on Napoleon, we targeted 4K, and we targeted HDR grading in the grade, and that was like the master. And then for film, and if it's going to go up to 70mm print, the 4K obviously is going to help. I think it's plenty, probably, for a large format film, But the formats is more a question of not just the resolution, but also whether you want it to look like film. And there's newer processes happening, right? Where it's like, shoot something, June has done this, I believe. Shoot on film, shoot digital, but record back out to film with a specific film stock with the intention that it looks like you filmed it on film. So it takes all those kind of qualities which are almost a little bit undefined. They're from years of Kodak developing a look, or Fujifilm developing a chemistry, right, that gives a certain look, and you want to get that back into it. And nobody ever seems to be able to match it in a computer three-dimensional LUT to have the same qualities. So I think they're still trying to do that look. Of the films I've worked on in the past, I really do like science fiction films. It's what got me into the business. And Alien Covenant was, no, Alien Covenant, that's one of them, but Alien was a film that really affected me as a child. And so I'm glad that I worked on both Prometheus and Alien Covenant. I think they're not necessarily my favorite films, but as an experience, they're the ones that I'm pleased I worked on in the past.
You've all sacrificed so much to be here and be a part of this thing we're doing.
This crew is made up of couples.
It's the first ever large-scale colonization mission. And everyone back on Earth is really grateful for your hard work and your courage. We're making history here.
This is wheat. What are the odds of finding human vegetation this far from Earth?
Who planted it?
I would say Alien Covenant was the most difficult project I worked on. The reasons were
No animals.
that, I mean, on a personal level, it was quite a leap in responsibility, and the complexity of the show at the same time as taking that responsibility was hard. And we were shooting it I mean, Australia is great, but like on a personal level, being in Australia for 6 months was tough. So it was, on a personal level, that was the bigger challenge, I think, just getting through that and staying positive and happy. Positive was fine, but just like not being totally stressed out the whole time. You know, I'd done on production side supervising before, but not a project quite that status with Ridley Scott. We'd done The Counselor before. It was a pretty small project. I worked on Prometheus, but I had Richard Stammers, is like my mentor, was production soup for that. And then this was really like, you're in there with Ridley now, and you've got to, you know, live up to that. And he's a hard master, but it was a great experience, but it was a big personal challenge.
What happened here?
So in the future, my feeling of AI, I mean, I don't think I'm really qualified to answer properly on that. I really have I mean, I have a hope, maybe it's a hope, but I do feel that in the end, people will become somewhat sensitive to things that are produced by AI and still need there's something about a production that involves so many people with so many individual creative ideas all coming together, including the actor, but everything from the lighting to the actor, in a way that I don't think you know, that puzzle can be necessarily recreated 100%. And I think people may still learn to see something that's created by AI. Like for me, that's incredible concept work coming and incredible videos, but I get a certain sense of something about it that's almost like too perfect or too this or something in the ingredients of watching generated images that I think maybe people will develop an eye for it. And it's a bit like, you know, there's probably a way to cover it up. It's like create something in CG. We had CG films that look really good, but they still feel a bit CG, and then you develop an eye to see it. Now, if you see an old film that was like, has a lot of computer graphics in it, you go like, oh, it's computer, well, I do anyway. I go like, it's kind of looks computer graphic-y in a way that it's trying not to be. So I don't know, I still have hope it won't take over completely.